Engineer Jonas Mercer had been stationed on Helix Point for 11 months, which meant he'd survived nearly a full rotation cycle without losing his mind to the endless vacuum outside or the bureaucratic nightmare inside. The research facility orbited a binary star system, all gleaming metal and transparent observation domes, housing about 200 personnel from 6 different species. Jonas worked environmental controls, which was a fancy way of saying he fixed things when they stopped working, and prevented everyone from suffocating or freezing or cooking in their own quarters. It was honest work, occasionally tedious, frequently dirty, and he was good at it. His closest friend on the station was Rivka, a kelahn who worked in propulsion systems. The kelahn were relatively new to human contact, having joined the galactic community only about 15 years back, and they were striking to look at. Tall and graceful, with skin that shifted through subtle colors based on emotional state, and ears that swept back from their skulls in elegant curves that could express more emotion than most humans managed with their entire faces. Rivka's ears were particularly expressive, Jonas had learned. Forward tilt meant interest, back flat meant stress, and the little half-curl thing she did when he made a terrible joke meant she was trying not to laugh and failing. They'd fallen into friendship gradually, the way people do when they're stuck together in the void. Their departments overlapped enough that they worked together frequently, and somewhere between the third shared repair job and the 20th late-night meal in the observation deck, they'd become something like best friends. Rivka made terrible puns about quantum mechanics. Jonas introduced her to the concept of sarcasm, which she'd taken to with alarming enthusiasm. They traded complaints about station administration, debated the merits of various entertainment programs, and had developed a comfortable routine that made station life significantly less isolating. Tonight they were hunting down a coolant leak in Section 7, and Jonas was ready to throw his diagnostic equipment out an airlock. He'd been chasing this particular problem for 3 days, and it kept appearing in his sensors, and then vanishing the moment he got close enough to investigate properly. Rivka had volunteered to help after her shift ended, which meant it was nearly midnight station time, and they were both running on too much coffee and stubborn determination. "I'm telling you, it's the secondary coupling," Jonas said, checking his readings for the 40th time. "The pressure differential is exactly what we'd see if there was a seal failure, but the system insists the seals are intact." "Because the seals probably are intact," Rivka replied, already pulling off the access panel to the maintenance tunnel. "You're thinking too large-scale. What if it's not a seal failure but a microfracture? Something small enough that standard diagnostics wouldn't flag it but large enough to cause pressure irregularities." Jonas considered this. "That would explain why it keeps disappearing from my scans. The fracture would only be visible under specific pressure conditions." "Exactly." Rivka grabbed a handheld scanner and dropped to her knees, peering into the tunnel. "I'm going in. Monitor the readings from out there and tell me if anything changes." She crawled into the access tunnel with the kind of grace that made Jonas deeply envious. He was decent at his job, but he'd never managed to navigate maintenance spaces without banging his head or elbows at least twice. Rivka moved like she was designed for it, her slighter frame sliding through gaps that would have required Jonas to dislocate something. For 2 hours, they worked in tandem. Jonas monitored systems while Rivka methodically scanned every centimeter of the coolant lines, following the pressure irregularities like breadcrumbs. Station night cycle deepened around them, the corridors quiet except for the ever-present hum of life support and the occasional hiss of atmosphere regulators. "Got it," Rivka's voice echoed from deep in the tunnel, triumphant and slightly muffled. "The secondary coupling, just like you thought. There's a hairline fracture in the seal housing itself, not the seal. It's only visible when the pressure hits a specific threshold, which is why your diagnostics kept missing it. Jonas, you were right about the pressure differential." Jonas felt a wave of relief so intense he could have kissed her, except she was currently wedged into a space barely large enough for her shoulders, and also that would be deeply weird. Instead, he just grinned at the tunnel entrance and called back, "I'm always right. You just refuse to acknowledge my brilliance." "I refuse to encourage your already excessive ego," Rivka's voice replied, warm with amusement. A few minutes later, she emerged from the tunnel, her station uniform streaked with coolant residue and dust, her skin flickering pleased gold. She was smiling, ears tilted forward with satisfaction, and Jonas couldn't help but smile back. She just saved him from at least another week of hunting for this problem. He grabbed a cleaning cloth from his toolkit and handed it to her without thinking. "Thanks, love," he said, the words automatic, the same casual expression he'd use with his sister back on Earth or his best mate from university or the barista who handed him coffee in the station commissary. It meant nothing and everything, just the linguistic habit of someone who grew up in Manchester where half the population called each other love, regardless of actual affection. Rivka froze. Completely, utterly, absolutely froze, like someone had hit a pause button on her entire existence. The cleaning cloth fell from her fingers and drifted to the floor in the light gravity. Her eyes went wide, pupils dilating until they were almost entirely black, swallowing the violet irises. Her ears, which had been tilted forward with pleased accomplishment, suddenly flattened back against her skull so hard they almost disappeared into her hair. Her skin shifted through colors Jonas had never seen her display, cycling rapidly from the pleased gold to pale rose to something that looked like sunrise and terror combined, colors bleeding into each other too fast to track. "Rivka." Jonas stepped toward her, concern replacing his relief. "You all right? Did you hit your head in there?" She didn't respond. She was staring at him like he'd just said something that rewrote the fundamental laws of physics, her breathing quick and shallow. Jonas noticed her hands were trembling, actually shaking in a way he'd never seen from her before. The kelahn were generally composed, controlled, their movements precise and deliberate. Rivka looked like she was barely holding herself together. "Rivka, you're starting to freak me out a bit," Jonas said, keeping his voice gentle. "What's wrong? What happened? What did you say?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper, rough like she'd been shouting for hours. "I said thanks," Jonas replied, confused and increasingly worried, "for finding the leak. That was brilliant diagnostic work. Are you sure you're okay?" The other word. Her hands clenched into fists, and Jonas could see her physically trying to control the trembling. The word after thanks. "Say it again." Jonas replayed his words mentally, still not understanding what could possibly be wrong. "Love, it's just an expression, Rivka, British thing. Doesn't mean anything, really, like mate or pal or stop." The word came out sharp, almost panicked. Rivka pressed her palm against her temple, her fingers still shaking visibly. "My translator is processing it. The syntax registers. But Jonas, that word, that concept, it's not casual in any language. It's not meaningless. Among my people, that word is sacred." "Sacred." Jonas felt his stomach start to sink. "What do you mean sacred?" "I mean it's a bonding declaration." Rivka's voice was shaking now too, matching her hands. "Among the kelahn, you don't say that word casually. You don't say it accidentally. You say it once in your entire life to the person you choose to bind your soul to. It's—" She stopped, pressing both hands to her head now. "It triggers neurological responses. Bonding cascade. I can feel it activating. My neural pathways are lighting up. Jonas, you just spoke the kelahn equivalent of a marriage proposal, and my body has already responded to it." Jonas felt the world tilt sideways. "I didn't know." "Rivka, I swear I didn't know. It's just something we say on Earth. It's completely casual. I say it to everyone." "I know you didn't know." She was backing away now, one step and then another, until her back hit the far wall of the corridor. "I know humans use language differently. I know you didn't mean it the way my biology is interpreting it. But Jonas," her voice cracked, "it doesn't matter what you meant. The word triggered the response. The bonding cascade has started." and there's no way to stop it. Above them, the corridor lights flickered once, twice, like the station itself was reacting to whatever was happening. Jonas stared at Rivka, at her flattened ears and rapidly shifting skin, and the expression on her face that looked like wonder and horror and grief, all tangled together. "What does that mean?" he asked, though he was terrified he already knew the answer. "It means I'm bonding to you." Rivka slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. "It means my neural chemistry is restructuring itself to create permanent attachment to you. It means I'll spend the rest of my life neurologically connected to someone who said a casual word, without understanding what it would do. It means—" She stopped, her breath hitching in a way that sounded almost like a sob. "It means I've lost my autonomy to a linguistic accident, and you've lost your freedom to a cultural misunderstanding, and neither of us can fix it." Jonas stood frozen in the corridor, the cooling system repaired, the problem solved, and a much bigger problem opening up like a chasm at his feet. He'd said 2 words, just 2 casual words. And somehow, impossibly, those words had changed everything. Jonas didn't sleep that night. He sat in his quarters with every screen active, scrolling through file after file about kelahn biology, culture, bonding practices, anything that might help him understand what he'd accidentally done. What he found made his unintentional mistake exponentially, catastrophically worse than he'd imagined. The kelahn didn't bond casually. Their word for what humans might translate as love, kelahn, was neurologically linked to actual, measurable biochemical changes. When a kelahn heard that word spoken by someone they'd formed significant attachment to, their brain released a cascade of hormones that triggered permanent alterations in neural pathway formation. It was involuntary, irreversible, and absolutely fundamental to kelahn pair bonding. In natural kelahn to kelahn bonding, both partners experience the cascade simultaneously, creating balanced neurological connection. They became aware of each other's emotional states, experienced comfort in proximity and distress in separation, and developed what the academic papers called reciprocal resonance, a feedback loop of attachment that strengthened over time. It was beautiful, actually, when both partners wanted it, when the bonding was mutual and intentional. But cross-species bonding, especially bonding to a species that didn't experience the same neurological response, created what the papers clinically described as dangerous psychological imbalance. One partner bonded, aware, needing. The other partner unchanged, unaffected, unknowing. The bonded kelahn would experience all the effects of pair bonding while their chosen partner felt nothing unusual. The papers described it as psychological torture, a state of permanent, unfulfilled longing that could lead to severe depression, physical illness, and in extreme cases, voluntary cessation of existence. By the time Station Dawn cycle began, Jonas had read 14 academic papers, watched 3 documentary files, and felt physically sick with the understanding of what he'd done. He hadn't just made Rivka uncomfortable. He hadn't just created an awkward social situation. He triggered a biological process that had permanently altered her brain chemistry, would make her neurologically dependent on him for the rest of her life, and there was absolutely nothing medical science could do to reverse it. When he finally worked up the courage to seek her out, he found her in the observation deck at dawn cycle, staring out at the binary stars that dominated the view. She looked terrible. Her skin was a muted flat gray that the files had told him indicated emotional shutdown, a kelahn protective response to overwhelming feeling. Her ears drooped with exhaustion, and there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd slept as poorly as he had. Rivka, Jonas approached carefully like she was something fragile that might shatter if he moved too quickly. "I'm so sorry. I spent all night researching. I understand now what I did, what I triggered. I'm sorry. You didn't know." Her voice was flat, carefully controlled, all the warmth he was used to hearing stripped away. "Human ignorance of kelahn bonding biology isn't your fault. It's a gap in the cultural exchange protocols. It should have been covered in the orientation materials. That doesn't make it better. Jonas stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance because he didn't know if his proximity would make things worse. Is there, is there any way to reverse it? Some kind of treatment or medication or no? The word was quiet but absolutely final. The bonding cascade is irreversible once initiated. Once the neural pathways activate, they remain active. The biochemical changes are permanent. I will spend the rest of my life experiencing bonding attachment to you, whether you reciprocate or not, whether you want it or not. Jonas felt that settle on his chest like a physical weight, crushing and inescapable. What does that mean practically? Rivka finally looked at him, and her eyes held exhaustion and resignation, and something that looked like grief. It means I'm aware of you constantly, where you are on the station. Your general emotional state, to some degree. The bond isn't strong enough yet for detailed empathy, but that will develop over time. It means being near you feels necessary in a way I can't adequately explain with human concepts. It means the thought of you bonding with someone else causes actual, physical pain in my chest. It means, she stopped, her jaw working like the words were difficult to produce. It means I've lost my autonomy to an accident, and you've lost your freedom to a cultural misunderstanding, and we both have to figure out how to live with that reality. I could learn to reciprocate, Jonas said impulsively, desperately, and immediately regretted it when Rivka's expression shifted to something like horror. Don't. Her voice turned sharp. Don't you dare try to force yourself to feel something you don't feel because you feel guilty. That's not bonding, Jonas. That's obligation. That's pity. And it's the worst possible foundation for what should be the most profound connection in a kelah's life. I won't accept a counterfeit bond just because you feel responsible for my situation. But I do care about you, Jonas protested, hearing the desperation in his own voice. We're friends, good friends. That has to count for something, doesn't it? Friendship and bonding are not the same thing. Rivka stood abruptly, her movements jerky and uncoordinated in a way that was wrong for her usual grace. Bonding it's everything, Jonas. It's the central relationship of a kelah's entire existence. It's supposed to be mutual, intentional, sacred. What I'm experiencing is a biological malfunction triggered by linguistic accident. I don't want you to pretend to feel what you don't feel. I just need, her voice cracked. I need time. I need space to adapt to this. Please just leave me alone for a while. She walked away before Jonas could respond, her gray skin flickering with colors too muted to read, and he was left staring out at the binary stars, wondering how two casual words could destroy something that had felt so easy and comfortable just 12 hours ago. The next week was the worst of Jonas's life. Rivka avoided him completely, systematically and thoroughly. She changed her shift schedule so they wouldn't overlap. She ate at different times. She routed all interdepartmental coordination through other engineers when their work needed to intersect. Jonas caught glimpses of her occasionally, in corridors, in the commissary, once in the observation deck at a time. She clearly hadn't expected him to be there. Every time she looked worse. Her skin remained that awful flat gray. Her movements were slower, less graceful. She'd lost weight, her uniform hanging looser than it should. She was clearly not sleeping. And Jonas felt absolutely helpless to do anything about it. Other kelahs on the station began to notice. Jonas started getting looks from Rivka's colleagues, ranging from confused to actively hostile. Conversations would stop when he entered rooms. People who'd been friendly before now gave him careful distance, like he was radioactive or contaminated. On the 8th day, a kelah's scientist named Terk cornered Jonas in the engineering bay. Terk was older, his skin marked with the subtle patterning that indicated age among his people. His ears scarred from what Jonas vaguely remembered was some kind of military service. His expression was not friendly. "What did you do to her?" Terk demanded without preamble, his ears flat with anger. "Rivka, what did you do? She's experiencing bonding cascade without reciprocation. That kind of imbalance can cause permanent psychological damage, eventual physical deterioration. If you declared kelahn without understanding the implications. It was an accident, Jonas interrupted desperately. A linguistic mistake. I didn't know what the word meant in her culture. I swear I didn't know. Terek's anger shifted to something more complicated, pity mixed with frustration mixed with something that might have been sympathy. Ignorance doesn't reduce harm. Intent doesn't eliminate consequences. That girl trusted you, formed attachment to you, and now she's suffering bonding loneliness while you go about your life essentially unchanged. I'm not unchanged, Jonas snapped, feeling his own frustration boil over. I feel like absolute hell. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't fix this and she won't even talk to me. Tell me what I'm supposed to do because I have no idea. There is nothing you can do. Terek's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. There's only choosing how to move forward. Either you walk away completely, transfer to another station, remove yourself from her proximity, and let her adapt to permanent one-sided bonding over time. It will take years. It will be painful. But eventually, her neural pathways will stabilize around your absence. Or you, he stopped, shaking his head. But humans can't truly reciprocate kelahn bonding. Your neurology doesn't work that way. You don't have the biological capacity for it. So walking away is probably the kindest option in the long run, even if it's agony in the short term. You want me to leave? Jonas felt something cold settle in his chest. Just abandon her. I want you to stop prolonging her suffering. Terek's expression was tired now, the anger faded to weary sadness. Every day you remain on this station, she's aware of you. Every day you remain in proximity, her bond grows stronger, more entrenched. You're making it worse by staying, even if you mean well. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is remove yourself from their life. Jonas tried to give Rivka space, tried to stay away, tried to respect her request for distance. But it turned out that was effectively impossible on a research station where their departments needed to coordinate constantly, and they kept getting assigned to the same projects, because station administration had no idea what had happened between them and why it might be a problem. 3 weeks after the incident, a critical failure in the environmental control systems, Jonas's department, caused cascading problems in propulsion systems, Rivka's department. The station administrator basically ordered them to work together to solve it, because they were the two most qualified people in their respective areas, and the problem needed to be fixed immediately before it escalated into a genuine emergency. They met in the central maintenance bay, and Jonas nearly flinched at Rivka's appearance. She'd lost more weight in the past 3 weeks, her cheekbones too prominent, her uniform hanging off her frame. Her skin remained that muted gray, but now it had an unhealthy quality to it, like the color itself was faded. Her ears drooped with exhaustion, and the shadows under her eyes spoke to weeks of insufficient sleep. She looked fragile in a way that terrified him, because Rivka had never been fragile before. But her voice was professionally neutral when she said, "Show me the diagnostic readings." They worked in silence for 2 hours, communicating only about technical necessities. The temperature regulation failure had created pressure imbalances that were affecting propulsion efficiency. They needed to recalibrate 3 separate systems simultaneously, while compensating for the knock-on effects in life support. It was complex, delicate work that required both their expertise. Under normal circumstances, this was exactly the kind of problem they'd have tackled with enthusiasm, trading theories and jokes in equal measure. Now they worked in painful silence, and Jonas wanted to apologize for probably the 1,000th time, wanted to ask how she was doing, wanted to somehow make this better. But every time he considered speaking, he remembered her words. Don't you dare try to force yourself to feel something you don't feel because you feel guilty. And he kept his mouth shut. The problem was, Jonas was increasingly uncertain about what he actually felt. He missed Rivka. missed her terrible quantum mechanics puns, missed debating station politics over shared meals, missed the easy companionship they'd built. Was that just friendship? Or was it something more that he'd been too oblivious to recognize until it was ripped away? He'd spent 11 months working beside her, eating with her, talking with her about everything and nothing. He'd started thinking of her as his person on the station, the one he wanted to share good news with, the one he sought out when he was frustrated or tired or needed company. When had that happened? When had Rivka become essential to his daily existence? When they finally located the source of the system's failure, a corrupted control module that needed to be physically replaced, Rivka reached for the replacement part from the equipment bin at the exact same moment Jonas did. Their hands brushed, barely a second of contact, fingers touching as they both grabbed for the same component. The contact was minimal, incidental, completely innocent. Rivka gasped like she'd been electrocuted. Her skin flared suddenly from gray to brilliant, blazing gold, colors cascading across her face and arms like sunrise. Her eyes went wide, pupils contracting to pinpoints, and her entire body went rigid. Her ears shot forward, then back, then forward again in rapid succession that Jonas had never seen before. "Sorry," Jonas pulled back immediately, dropping the component. "I didn't mean to. Are you all right? You felt that?" Rivka was staring at him, her skin still cycling through gold and rose and something that looked like shock. "Tell me you felt that, Jonas. Tell me I'm not imagining it." "Felt what?" Jonas asked, but even as he said it, he knew that wasn't quite honest. He had felt something when their hands touched. Warmth spreading from the point of contact, a sense of rightness, of connection, of something clicking into place that he couldn't adequately name. "I felt something. I don't know what. Like touching you was important somehow. But that could just be because I've been worried about you for weeks and any contact feels significant compared to you avoiding me. Or it could be something else." Rivka moved closer, deliberate and careful, her skin still shifting through colors that Jonas was starting to recognize as hope. "It's rare. It's documented in maybe 0.3% of cross-species partnerships. But Jonas," her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "if you felt that connection when we touched, if you felt anything at all, it means your neural pathways might be responding to my bonding cascade. It means you might be developing reciprocal resonance. You're saying I might be developing alien bonding biology?" Jonas asked, the words sounding absurd even as he said them. "I'm saying there's a small but non-zero chance that your accidental declaration triggered not just my bonding cascade but the beginning of yours. And 3 weeks of sustained low-level awareness of me, while I've been actively bonding, has been gradually activating pathways you didn't know you had." Rivka held up her hand, palm out, not quite touching him. "May I test something? It requires physical contact. If you're not comfortable, do it," Jonas said immediately, because whatever was happening, he needed to understand it. Rivka took his hand, properly this time, her long fingers interlacing with his. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Warmth spreading from the point of contact up his arm, into his chest, settling somewhere behind his ribs like a physical presence. A feeling of rightness and homecoming that made absolutely no biological sense. An awareness of Rivka that went beyond seeing her or hearing her. Some additional sense activating that told him she was relieved and hopeful and still terrified all at once. Jonas's breath caught in his chest. "Oh," he said, "inadequate and insufficient. That's what is that?" "That's partial bonding resonance," Rivka said, and there were tears on her face now, tracking down her cheeks while her skin blazed gold. "Jonas, you're developing reciprocation. It's incomplete. It might not ever complete fully. Your human neurology might not support full bonding the way kelahn neurology does, but it's there. You feel it. I can see in your face that you feel it." "I feel it," Jonas confirmed, because there was no point denying what was obvious. The warmth where their hands connected, the awareness of her emotional state, the sense that this contact was necessary and right, and something his body had been craving without him consciously knowing it. Rivka, I'm so sorry for all of this, for saying something I didn't understand, for making you suffer alone for weeks, for being too stupid to recognize what I was feeling until you literally had to demonstrate it. Stop apologizing. Rivka's free hand came up to his face, cupping his cheek gently, and the additional contact made the warmth in Jonas's chest intensify. You made a mistake. A genuine, honest mistake born of cultural ignorance. But mistakes aren't the same as malice. Accidents aren't the same as cruelty. And Jonas, if this is real, if you're truly developing bonding resonance, then perhaps it wasn't entirely accident. Perhaps some part of you recognized something my conscious mind had been too careful to acknowledge. That I care about you, Jonas asked, his voice rough. That I've cared about you for months. That losing you has been the worst 3 weeks of my life. That we were becoming something important to each other, and I was too afraid to name it because cross-species bonding seemed like an impossible dream, and you were too culturally oblivious to recognize what was happening. Rivka managed a smile, small and tremulous but real. Very romantic origin story. We bonded because you're an idiot who doesn't understand that other languages have different meanings for common words. Hey, Jonas protested weakly, but he was smiling too, the first real smile in 3 weeks. I'm an idiot who's apparently developing alien neurology for you. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Rivka said, serious again. But Jonas, you need to understand what you're choosing if you pursue this. If the bonding completes, if your neural pathways fully activate and synchronize with mine, it's permanent. For both of us, kelahn don't divorce, we don't separate, we don't walk away when things get difficult. Once bonded, we're bonded for life, in sickness and health, until death separates us. And if you're developing true reciprocal resonance rather than just proximity-based attachment, the same will become true for you. You'll be neurologically bound to me, unable to form that same depth of bond with anyone else. Is that really what you want? Jonas thought about the past 3 weeks, the misery of Rivka's absence, the constant low-level awareness that something was wrong, that something essential was missing from his life. The way seeing her in corridors and not being able to approach her had felt like physical pain. The relief he'd felt when they'd been forced to work together, even though she'd looked terrible and they'd barely spoken. He thought about the 11 months before that, the easy conversations and shared repairs and comfortable companionship, the way Rivka made even the tedium of station life feel engaging. How she'd become the first person he wanted to tell when something interesting happened, the person whose opinion mattered most, the one he sought out when he needed company or comfort or just someone who understood. He thought about the future, decades potentially, if they both stayed on station rotations or found other placements together. Decades of this warmth where their hands connected, this awareness of her emotional state, this sense that Rivka was essential to his existence in ways that transcended friendship or attraction or anything he'd experienced before. Yes, Jonas said simply, meeting her eyes. That's what I want. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure it out. I'm sorry I had to accidentally trigger a biological crisis before I recognized what was right in front of me. But Rivka, yes, I want this. I want you. However long it takes for my idiot human neurology to catch up to what I'm feeling, I'm choosing this. The next months were a learning process, often frustrating, occasionally hilarious, always deeply meaningful. Jonas studied kelahn bonding traditions with the same intensity he usually reserved for engineering problems. He learned that bonded pairs traditionally exchanged kelahn stones, small crystalline formations native to the kelahn homeworld, engraved with patterns unique to each couple. He learned that bonding ceremonies involved family, community, the formal recognition that two souls had chosen to intertwine. He learned the proper courtship protocols, the traditional gifts, the poetry and music associated with bonding celebrations. He learned that what he'd accidentally said, that casual thanks, love, was essentially a proposal made backward, the declaration spoken before the courtship. And while kelahn traditions were flexible enough to accommodate unusual circumstances, the proper order would have involved months of intentional connection before ever speaking that sacred word. He also learned that his developing bonding resonance was being quietly studied by kelahn xenobiologists across 3 research institutions, because apparently he was only the 4th human ever documented to develop measurable cross-species bonding capability, and the first to do so with a kelahn partner. They asked to monitor his neural development, running regular scans and asking detailed questions about what he was experiencing. Jonas agreed readily, figuring if he was going to accidentally become a medical anomaly, he might as well contribute to scientific understanding. The scans showed exactly what Rivka had suspected. His brain was developing new neural pathways, activating regions that had been dormant, producing neurotransmitters that human brains typically didn't synthesize in significant quantities. His neurology was literally restructuring itself in response to sustained proximity to an actively bonding kelahn. It was fascinating from a scientific perspective and occasionally terrifying from a personal one. The most difficult adjustment was learning to manage the bond itself. As Jonas's resonance deepened over weeks and months, he became increasingly aware of Rivka's emotional state. When she was stressed about a difficult repair, he felt an echo of that tension. When she was happy, he felt warmer, lighter, like sunlight on his skin. When they were separated for too long, anything more than a few hours initially, though the tolerance gradually increased, he experienced what the kelahn called kelahn, bonding loneliness. A hollow ache in his chest that only proximity to Rivka could relieve. "Is this what you've been feeling since I said the word?" Jonas asked one evening as they sat together in the observation deck, pressed close on a bench designed for a single occupant. They'd taken to spending their off shifts together, both because it felt necessary and because they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "Yes," Rivka confirmed, her head resting on his shoulder. "Except much stronger at first, when it was completely one-sided. Unreciprocated bonding feels like constant low-grade pain, like part of yourself is missing." This, she gestured vaguely between them, encompassing the warmth where their bodies touched, the comfortable awareness of each other's presence. "This feels right, balanced, complete." "I'm sorry you had to experience the painful version alone," Jonas said, probably for the 1,000th time since they'd reconciled. "I know you are," Rivka replied patiently, also probably for the 1,000th time. "And I've forgiven you." Repeatedly. "Now you need to forgive yourself and stop apologizing for an honest mistake that ultimately led us here." 6 months after the accidental declaration, they held a formal bonding ceremony. It was a hybrid affair, carefully planned to honor both kelahn traditions and human customs. Both families attended via video link, because interstellar travel was still expensive and slow, but the station's kelahn community turned out in force, along with Jonas's human colleagues and friends. Rivka wore traditional kelahn ceremonial robes that shimmered with embedded fiber optics, creating patterns of light that shifted as she moved. Jonas wore the nicest suit he owned, slightly too formal for station life, but absolutely appropriate for the most important day of his life. His mother had insisted on the suit via video call, and he'd learned long ago not to argue with her about these things. The ceremony took place in the station's largest observation dome, surrounded by stars and the spectacular view of the binary system they orbited. A kelahn officiant led the traditional portions, while a human friend of Jonas's handled the adapted human elements. When the officiant asked Jonas to speak the bonding words properly this time, intentionally, with full understanding of their meaning and weight, he took Rivka's hands and met her eyes. "Kelahn," he said clearly, the kelahn word that had started everything. "I choose you, Rivka. I bond my soul to yours, freely and with full knowledge of what this word means in your culture. I speak this sacred word intentionally, accepting its permanence, honoring its weight. You are my bonded partner today and for all the days we're given. I will stand with you in joy and sorrow, in ease and difficulty, in exploration and rest. I choose you, and I will keep choosing you, every day for the rest of our lives." Rivka's skin flared brilliant, blazing gold, and tears streamed down her face as she responded in kind, speaking the traditional kelahn bonding vows in her own language. The words were musical and profound, and Jonas's translator provided the meaning. Promises of eternal partnership, mutual support, shared purpose, souls intertwined. When they touched foreheads in the traditional kelahn gesture of bonding completion, Jonas felt something in his neural pathways click fully into place. The partial resonance that had been gradually developing over months suddenly completed, synchronizing with Rivka's in a way that made the warmth in his chest expand to encompass his entire awareness. He could feel her joy, her relief, her love, as clearly as he felt his own emotions, and the sensation was overwhelming and perfect and absolutely right. The assembled witnesses applauded, humans clapping, kelahn touching their own foreheads in the traditional gesture of witnessing and blessing. Both families were crying on the video screens. Jonas's mother was demanding that they visit Earth soon so she could meet her new daughter-in-law properly. Rivka's parents were already planning a trip to the station to deliver the family kelahn stones in person. It was chaotic and emotional and absolutely perfect. Later, in their newly designated shared quarters, station administration had been remarkably accommodating once they'd officially registered as bonded partners. Rivka traced idle patterns on Jonas's palm while they lay together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That it happened the way it did, that you didn't get to choose with full knowledge of what you were choosing?" Jonas considered the question seriously because Rivka deserved honesty. "I regret that you suffered," he said finally. "I regret my ignorance about your culture. I regret the weeks you spent in pain because I'd triggered something I didn't understand. But the outcome, where we ended up, no, I don't regret this. I don't regret us. Sometimes the best things in life happen because we stumble into them backward and then have the courage to choose them intentionally." "Very philosophical for an engineer," Rivka teased gently, her skin shifting to amused pink. "I'm a bonded engineer now," Jonas replied with mock solemnity. "Comes with enhanced philosophical capabilities. Didn't they mention that in the literature?" Rivka laughed, the sound warm and unguarded, and Jonas felt the echo of her joy through their completed bond. Physical proof of their connection, neural evidence that they were no longer two completely separate individuals but something new and more complete together. It was strange and wonderful and occasionally overwhelming, but it was theirs. Word of their bonding spread through both human and kelahn diplomatic channels. Jonas started receiving messages from other mixed-species couples asking questions, seeking advice, hoping that their own connections might develop into something deeper. He and Rivka became unlikely ambassadors for cross-species relationships, giving presentations to new station arrivals about the importance of cultural sensitivity and the necessity of learning your partner's language, both literal and metaphorical, before making assumptions about shared meanings. "We're famous now," Jonas observed after their third joint presentation, about avoiding intercultural misunderstandings in romantic contexts. "Famous for you being an idiot who triggered a biological crisis through linguistic ignorance. Famous for being an idiot who committed to fixing his mistake," Rivka corrected gently. "That's actually the more important part of the story. Lots of people make cross-cultural mistakes. Not everyone has the courage to face the consequences honestly and do the work to make things right." Years later, 3 years after that initial accidental declaration, they were transferred together to a new research station orbiting closer to the kelahn homeworld. The transfer had been Jonas's idea, a chance for Rivka to be nearer to her family, and the fact that the station offered better research opportunities for both their specialties was a bonus. When they arrived, Rivka's family met them at the docking bay. Her parents greeted Jonas with the traditional kelahn bonding acknowledgement, touching his forehead gently in the gesture that welcomed him as family, as kin, as someone permanently connected to their daughter. Her younger sibling, who'd been barely adolescent when they'd bonded, was now nearly adult and immediately started asking questions. "Tell me the bonding story," they demanded as the family gathered for a meal in Rivka's childhood home. "I want to hear it from both of you." Jonas and Rivka exchanged glances and Jonas gestured for her to start. She recounted it honestly, leaving out nothing: the accidental declaration, the triggered bonding cascade, the weeks of painful separation, Jonas's developing reciprocal resonance, the choice to commit despite the unconventional beginning. "So you didn't mean to bond," the sibling said when she'd finished, ears tilted with fascination. "Not initially," Jonas agreed. "Not in that moment when I said the word, but I meant it every moment after I understood what it was. I meant it when I chose to stay on the station instead of transferring away. I meant it when I did the research to understand what Rivka was experiencing. I meant it when I felt that first spark of resonance and chose to pursue it instead of walking away. And I mean it now, 3 years later, every single day. Sometimes the most important things in life are the ones we discover by accident and then choose to keep on purpose." Rivka took his hand across the table, their fingers interlacing automatically, and Jonas felt the familiar warmth of their bond, the neural connection that had started with ignorance and fear, and had grown into something profound and permanent and absolutely essential to both their lives. He thought about that moment in the maintenance corridor, the casual words spoken without thought, the world-changing consequences of not understanding what he was saying. And he thought about everything that had followed, the pain and the learning and the choice and the commitment and the building of something new together. "No regrets," he said aloud, squeezing Rivka's hand gently. "Not a single one." Her skin flared gold, and through their bond, he felt her answering agreement. The deep, settled contentment of someone who'd found their person, their partner, their chosen soul, even if the finding had been chaotic and accidental and completely unplanned. Rivka's mother smiled, her own skin shifting to pleased colors. "That's what all the best bonding stories are," she said wisely. "Accidents that become intentional, mistakes that become meaning, chaos that becomes commitment. You stumbled into each other, but you chose to stay. That's what matters." Later that evening, standing on the balcony of Rivka's family home with the kelahn homeworld spread out below them in bioluminescent glory, Jonas wrapped his arms around Rivka from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me a chance after I'd accidentally ruined everything, for being patient while my stupid human brain figured out what it was feeling, for choosing me back." "Thank you for saying the word," Rivka replied, leaning back against him. "Even accidentally, even without understanding. Because somehow, impossibly, it was the right word at the right time, even if neither of us knew it yet." They stood in comfortable silence, bonded in content, two souls intertwined through accident and choice, and the mysterious alchemy that sometimes turns mistakes into miracles. And if anyone had asked Jonas whether he regretted that casual, thoughtless thanks, love, that had changed both their lives forever, he would have answered the same way every time. No regrets, not ever, because the best thing that ever happened to him started with words he didn't understand and grew into a bond that defined his entire existence.